Well, President Donald Trump is worried that he could fall into a perjury trap if he agrees to sit down under oath with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. In an interview with Reuters, the president echoed the concerns of his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, saying, quote, "So if I say something and Comey says something and it's my word against his and he's best friends with Mueller, so Mueller might say, well, I believe Comey. And if I'm telling the truth, that makes me a liar." Well, according to Reuters, the president would not say whether he would, in the end, agree to a sit down. He also said that he would not say if he considered stripping Mueller of his security clearance, saying, "I haven't given it a lot of thought." Well, joining me now, Ryan Grimm. He's the D.C. bureau chief for the Intercept, and he joins us now. So, Ryan, with the president's description of a perjury trap being his word versus Comey's word, I mean, is that really how it works?
Well, on the one hand, it's a little absurd to say that you are refusing to testify because you're afraid that you're going to get charged with lying when you testify. On the other hand, from the president's perspective, it is a fact that Mueller and Comey are very close. They are friends. They speak highly of each other. And, you know, also maybe in the president's defense, he's known as a pathological liar. And so if you are Mueller and you're saying, OK, who am I going to believe here? Comey, who I've respected throughout my entire career and worked with and known to be, flawed but an honest figure, or President Trump, who the press has said has told 4,000 plus lies since he was sworn into office, and probably a dozen or so already today. So, this is perhaps a little bit of unusual self-awareness on the part of the president.
You know, on the investigation itself, the president said that I could run it if I wanted to, but I decided I would stay out of it. I mean, is he suggesting that he could potentially step in at some point? And what do you think that means for him? If he steps into a probe, could that potentially foreshadow obstruction of justice or hint at obstruction of justice?
Well, he explicitly said that he could step into the probe if he wanted to, and then said, "But of course, I'm not going to." It is ironic that this is partly an obstruction of justice probe, and he keeps doing things that appear to obstruct the probe itself. He continues to claim that there's nothing underlying the obstruction investigation, and he could wind up being one of the few people who is actually innocent, yet still commits the crime of obstruction of justice. It would be an irony if he obstructed the investigation into that obstruction.
You know, the president said he hasn't really given much thought to Mueller's security clearance, but today he did tweet out about former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, and he said that maybe Clapper is being nice to him so he doesn't lose his security clearance. What do you think that suggests about how the president is handling national security matters, and at what point does the president himself need to be checked?
People initially said, that when he went after Brennan's security clearance, that the reason he was doing it was to retaliate against a critic. And people pointed out that if that was the case, that is a dictatorial, autocratic approach to critics, not the kind of approach we take in a Republican or Democratic form of government. And of course, the official rationale was that he was behaving erratically, and therefore that's why he lost his clearance. This tweet again just makes clear that Trump's motive was to punish a critic, and now he's saying, "Look, I punished this critic, and now other critics are chilled in their expression of criticism of me." That is precisely what opponents of his move said was the purpose, and he's now admitting to it.
You know, according to Reuters, the president again neglected to blame Russia for interfering in the 2016 election. But in response to a new report that's out today, Microsoft saying that there was further Russian hacking attempts, the Kremlin actually spoke out. The spokesman saying that for the U.S., we hear there was not any meddling in the election. How do you counter the Russians if the president of the United States does not aggressively address this?
Well, you have an entire administration that operates at times with some independence from what Trump says publicly. If you look at how the administration's posture is situated towards Russia, it's been aggressive. It's been harsh. It's been in line with administrations in the past in treating Russia as a geopolitical adversary. It's Trump on Twitter and Trump in person who treats Putin as a close friend and an ally of the United States. But that's divorced from the actual policy of the United States that continues today, which is to sanction Russia, to continue to call them out, to attempt to isolate them, to saber rattle and to ratchet up the pressure on Russia. So, there is a large apparatus of government that operates independent of Trump's Twitter feed.
Before you go, Ryan, I also want to ask you about this morning. Senator Elizabeth Warren unveiled a new anti-corruption legislation. I want to play some of her announcement for you.
This is an aggressive set of reforms that would fundamentally change the way Washington does business. These reforms have one simple aim: to take power in Washington away from the wealthy, the powerful, and the well-connected who have corrupted our government, and put power back in the hands of the American people.
You actually wrote about this today. What can you tell us about her plan? And do you really think that it has legs? Can it go anywhere?
Well, what she's proposing here would probably have 90+% support among the American people if you sat down and talked to them about it. The fact that it's considered radical in Washington really tells you just how deep the rot is here in town. She's proposing that foreign lobbying be banned. It doesn't mean that foreign governments can't try to influence Washington. They just have to have their own ambassadors and other officials. She's proposing that lobbyists have to disclose, who it is that they're lobbying and what materials they're providing to them, who they're meeting with, and who's paying them. It tries to shut down the revolving door, saying you can't, you can't profit from your public service. We'll see if this gains traction. It's unlikely to be signed into office by President Trump, but it would be a very difficult thing for Democrats on the campaign trail to say that they oppose. And so, if Democrats do retake power in 2020 or 2024, this would be something that would be on the agenda.
So more likely if they were to take the reins on Capitol Hill. When you mention Democrats, Warren is seen as a potential 2020 presidential front runner. How does unveiling this legislation play into her potential run for president?
I mean, it certainly gives her something to differentiate herself from the pack, and also to differentiate herself from kind of the Democratic socialist wing. She recently said, I'm a capitalist to my bones. And that might be off-putting to some supporters of Sanders or Ocasio-Cortez, but her approach, her ideological approach here has always been to kind of use government and use law enforcement to attack consolidation, to attack concentrations of power, and actually to support markets. She believes that markets, when they're functioning properly, are actually a check against the consolidated power of big business. But in order for those markets to function properly and not have crooks running wild in them, you actually have to enforce laws, put bankers in jail, put other fraudsters in jail. And that was the impetus behind the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It was the impetus between a bill she announced last week around shareholder rights. And it undergirds this as well. It says that we're going to keep the system as it roughly is, but we're going to make sure that you follow rules. And if you don't, you're going to prison. That this is not something that she's shying away from.
In her speech, Ryan, Warren slammed the government for its relationship with the fossil fuel industry. Today, the Trump administration unveiled its new rules for actually scaling back Obama-era coal plant regulations. I mean, is this all about the president making good on campaign promises, and does it work? We know he's heading out there today.
Well, it should work to win West Virginia. He won West Virginia by, 40 or 50 points, so I think he's probably safe over there. He has a fascination with coal that has no connection to the reality of the industry. There's nothing that Trump can do that can revive the coal industry. It's finished, and it needs to be finished. Scientists have said that we cannot, open new coal mines. We cannot continue to burn fossil fuels if we're going to meet the targets we need to stave off, basically, civilization-wide collapse. And so, Trump doesn't doesn't care about that, and you know, he kind of loves the idea of what he calls clean, beautiful coal, which is, you know, just a silly idea, and so, you know, he loves rallies, and you know, he loves his base, he loves his West Virginians. So this is just all kind of theater for him.
But you know, theater comes at a price here, Ryan. You know, the fine print reportedly includes an acknowledgement that the plan would actually increase carbon emissions. We're talking, you know, 400 premature deaths annually. So how exactly can the Trump administration write off on a plan that could lead to 400 deaths?
And right, while he can't revive the coal industry broadly, you're right. He can do extraordinary damage, and he can set us back, at a time when we need to be moving aggressively, like extremely aggressively, in the opposite direction, if we're going to stave off this cataclysmic climate change that we're already seeing occur. How can he do it? He just gets in his plane and flies out to West Virginia, and there's nothing to stop him right now.
Ryan Grimm, so grateful you could join us, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.